Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. The Supreme Court's decision to ban the use of race in college admissions has some students concerned about the future of campus diversity.
It's just going to cause Black students and brown students and minorities just to have to go to HBCUs.
Experts expect the ruling to mostly affect elite universities. After years of delays, there's been some movement on the Monroe County Convention Center expansion.
Essentially, this is turning over a lot of those kind of decision-making processes to the CIB.
We'll have more on what hurdles the project could face. And we'll introduce you to the talented teen violinist representing Indiana on the world stage. Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Some members of the IU community are worried about how the university will make efforts toward diversity in the wake of last week's Supreme Court decision that struck down race-conscious admissions practices at schools that accept federal money. Indiana universities, including IU Bloomington, Purdue, and Notre Dame, did use race-conscious admissions, but as Benta Boutier reports at IU Bloomington, white enrollment last year was more than 2.5 times higher than domestic enrolled students of color.
The biggest increases in diversity have been in Asian American and Spanish and Latino groups. Enrollment of African American students hasn't changed much since 2017. Falling between 1,900 to 2,000 students. Vice President of IU's Black Student Union, Charlie Carter, knew the stats when she chose IU and was worried. A first-generation college student, she found a tight-knit community and resources with IU BSU and at places like the Neil Marshall Black Culture Center.
I think having those things here before coming to IU, it made me feel like safe and secure.
She says in-person recruitment in diverse areas will be important if universities don't want decreases in applicants following the Supreme Court's ruling.
But I think it's just going to cause Black students and brown students and minorities just to have to go to HBCUs because that is their only option, not even a last option or whatever, it's their only option.
Rain Lee is a first-generation college student from Carmel. She's the treasurer of the Asian American Association at IU and says most Asian Americans are not in favor of the Supreme Court's decision and won't benefit from it.
Having affirmative action helps barriers, a lot of barriers for people who are picking maybe between schools, and the difference is the amount of scholarship money, and it could be really easily differentiated and help to be differentiated with affirmative action.
She's a finance major in the Kelley School of Business and says her peers are mostly white.
Like, you learn from your peers, you learn from your teammates. So if I'm the diversity token, what am I really learning from? I'm being surrounded by like white people, and I've been surrounded by white people my entire life growing up. In many ways, like, they're learning a lot about cultural differences or just small little things from me.
Lee says the removal of race-based admissions means groups supporting diversity will be more important in creating safe places on campus, and wants the university to recognize that through financial support. Professor Emeritus at the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, Leslyn Kowski, says the Supreme Court's decision will mostly affect people applying to elite schools and isn't as far-reaching as people would think.
The question, though, is whether or not a person's chances in life are going to be significantly affected if he or she goes to Cal State Northridge rather than the University of California at Berkeley. Or to put it in our terms, let's say Indiana State versus Indiana University.
A Big Ten panel Wednesday discussed the Supreme Court's decision and its view of the Equal Protection Clause, which takes a colorblind approach to the Constitution's 14th Amendment.
There's nothing in the text of the 14th Amendment that says colorblindness. It says there shall be no denial of equal protection. And that leaves open the question of whether or not there may be times when the government can take note of race or make a race-based distinction and still deliver equal protection.
Carter says the Black Student Union plans to get people registered to vote in 2024.
It's the fact that, like, you can really change the country, like, by voting. You know, you can change laws that you don't like. You can have a say on that.
She says IU has resources to encourage diversity and needs to be a good listener when issues arise. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
IU said in a statement last week it's reviewing the court's decision and reaffirms its commitment to fostering a learning environment enriched by students, faculty, and staff with a broad range of backgrounds. Storms across the country 2 weeks ago wreaked havoc not only on the ground but in the air. The storms, which brought tornadoes to Indiana and pummeled the East Coast, caused thousands of flight delays, cancellations, leaving passengers stranded and frustrated. But last Friday, TSA screened a record 2.9 million people at U.S. airports, and Wednesday, airlines had more than 50,000 flights in the air. I spoke last night with Vladimir Blatkevich, an associate professor in aviation management at Purdue University, about the topsy-turvy world of airline travel. All right, well, let's just start with last week. The U.S. saw another round of cancellations and long delays. I've been seeing more this week, mainly because of weather, but are there other factors?
Well, my understanding is that even though weather is really the major contributing factor behind last week's delays, staff shortages are also an important factor. I mean, it looks like some of the airlines I have read are complaining about the staff shortages on the air traffic control side. And I mean, this is really kind of the problem that has been brewing for quite some time. You know, we can even go back all the way to the 1980s, the air traffic controllers strike, when actually the FAA ended up with the task of basically recruiting a lot of air traffic controllers who are now retiring. So in other words, we do have staffing shortages that are kind of still a problem and will likely remain an issue for quite some time.
Airlines were basically telling passengers good luck after canceling flights. And I can attest, I was one of those stuck in New York last week for a couple days. It's not a great feeling to get that email or text message saying, sorry, we've canceled your flight and we don't have any others. So what rights do passengers have? What is the Biden administration trying to do to address them?
Well, as far as the passenger rights, at this moment, the passengers are largely at the airline's discretion. In most cases, I mean, the airlines are required to offer you a refund for the unused portion of your ticket in case the airline cancels the flight. So that is really the law. Other than that, you are pretty much on your own. Well, the Biden administration has proposed the regulations to require the airlines to compensate passengers for delays that are the airline's fault. But other than that, so basically, no administration is going to save you or is going to make the airlines compensate you for weather-related delays or cancellations. So that's just out of the question.
So meanwhile, TSA reporting record number of passenger screenings, planes in the air. So are we just to expect that it's kind of a gamble. I mean, there are going to be good days, bad days to fly, and take that into consideration when booking your flight.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's something that we unfortunately have to accept, especially as far as the weather delays go, right? So weather is outside of our control.
Well, I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to ask you, I mean, we talk about the golden age of flying. Is it over? Is this the new normal?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on what you're referring to when you're talking about the golden age of flying, so to speak, right? So if you're thinking about, let's say, 1970s, 1980s with half-empty planes, which flights mostly on time, blankets, in-flight meals, and all the other stuff, that's not coming back anywhere, well, anytime. The air travel will continue being affordable, will continue sort of being subject to the weather delays, and I mean, also importantly, the air travel will continue being safe.
That was Vladimir Balatkayich, a professor in aviation management at Purdue University. Well, we're joined now by Lucas Gonzalez for headlines from around the state.
Thanks, Joe. Power is back on in west central Indiana after a weekend of turbulent weather. Duke Energy reported more than 300,000 outages, almost a third of its customers due to the storm. In extreme cases, power was out for a full week.
We're crunching the numbers, but it looks like this is one of the most significant storms to ever hit our Indiana utility.
Duke and other energy providers turned to outside workers to complete repairs. In Duke's case, over 1,000 additional workers were brought on from other areas. Energy user advocates say utilities should be doing more to prevent these prolonged outages, especially as Indiana continues to approve rate increases and pass legislation aimed at ensuring reliability.
Those responsible for overseeing and regulating those utilities should hold them accountable when they don't deliver on what it is they tell folks they're going to do.
Duke Energy is in the middle of a multi-year effort to replace aging infrastructure and add technology to better isolate outages. The city of Bloomington is working to replace its older streetlights with new cost-efficient LED ones. Isabella Vesperini has this report.
Bloomington's Ingrid Webke says she's concerned about cars not seeing her walking at night.
So you need this balance between protecting both public safety and wildlife. Lights have to be well designed, away from important habitats.
Webke also worries how certain types of street lamps can affect wildlife, such as fireflies and frogs. She thinks the city should install low-hanging LED lights that face down in order to avoid biodiversity loss and reduce carbon emissions. Christina Smith is Special Projects Coordinator at the City of Bloomington. She says most of the streetlights in Bloomington are sodium vapor lights. They have a sensor that automatically turns the lights on when it gets dark and turns them off when the sun rises. Under the system, if one light bulb goes out, the chain of lights on the street they are connected to go out as well.
Unfortunately, we have some lights that are at least 30 or 30 plus years old. But we want to convert to an LED, which is more energy efficient. They last longer.
Smith says the city is replacing 1,000 older sodium vapor lights with LED lights. So far, workers have been in the Crestmont area, on West 17th Street, and on the east end of town. She says the city has also begun to light back alleyways on 6th Street.
We're constantly trying to improve upon our lighting programs every year. I really think that we'll be able to get many more lights in, and I'm really happy about that.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
Pharmacists in Indiana can prescribe birth control under state legislation now in effect. But pharmacists don't have to prescribe birth control if they don't want to. And prescriptions can only be for up to 6 months. And after a year of getting prescriptions from a pharmacist, a patient must see a doctor, advanced practitioner nurse, or physician assistant. Indiana's near total abortion ban is set to go into effect within the next month or so, after the state Supreme Court ruled it does not violate the Indiana Constitution. Under the law, abortions are only allowed if the pregnant person's serious health or life is at risk, if there's a lethal fatal anomaly, and in cases of rape or incest. Last year, Indiana providers performed more than 9,500 abortions. That was up 13% from 2021. Youth tobacco use among Hoosiers is the lowest since 2012, according to data collected last year. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Comber-Weiland reports, despite declines in overall usage, state health officials are still concerned about youth tobacco use.
According to the Indiana Department of Health's Youth Tobacco Survey, over 1 in 10 high school students and 1 in 30 middle school students said they used tobacco in 2022. E-cigarettes were the most frequently used form, with 9.2% of high schoolers and 2.2% of middle schoolers using these products. There was a decline in the use of e-cigarettes, cigars, and cigarettes over the last decade of surveys. High school student usage went from about 23% in 2018 to 10.5% in 2022. For middle schoolers, more than 8% used tobacco in 2018 compared to 3.3% last year. Despite these declines, some health officials say it is troubling that the majority of youth who use tobacco use flavored e-cigarettes, which they say can increase the appeal of these products. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Comber-Weiland.
The Monroe County Board of Zoning Appeals this week again declined the Sojourn House a variance to house women who've been trafficked and exploited. Sojourn House originally applied for a variance in March for the house it bought on Monroe County's far east side, then appealed this week. They wanted the single-family home to be zoned for group housing, but the BZA denied the variance both times, saying the area isn't appropriate for group housing.
When you start talking about, oh, these kind of people are going to bring down my property values, or these kind of people aren't fit to live in this kind of setting, you're making judgment calls.
And Joe Muncie says because of the delay, they've lost contact with some of the women on the wait list to move into the house.
All right, Lucas, thanks so much. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. The Monroe County Convention Center expansion project is moving forward after commissioners approved a CIB to manage it. And we'll meet a talented teen violinist from Evansville who is representing Indiana on the world stage. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I've always believed that people are at the heart of every story we tell.
Any story or interview that makes people who watch it say, you know, I hadn't thought of it in that way. That for me is gold.
I like to be able to leave the viewer with some sort of emotion, whether it's outrage, whether it's someone overcoming long odds, telling a big story through an individual story.
What makes the NewsHour different is that we have time to be thoughtful about the stories that we tell, the voices that we intend to elevate.
I know the role that good journalism plays in making all of us feel more connected to each other, in helping all of us understand each other a little bit better. I see this as a mission, and I see this as a service.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Monroe County will establish a body to oversee the Monroe County Convention Center expansion project. Lucas Gonzalez reports this step has been a long time coming.
The Monroe County Commissioners approved a Capital Improvement Board, or a CIB, on Wednesday to supervise expansion of the County Convention Center. The board will consist of 7 appointed members. They will choose a site for expansion, oversee partnerships, and contract with operation and management organizations.
Essentially, this is turning over a lot of those kind of decision-making processes to the CIB.
Wednesday's vote ended a long-standing dispute over what type of body should manage the project. Commissioners first approved an ordinance to establish a CIB last fall, but it was never executed because it required support from the Bloomington Mayor's office, as well as the county and city councils. Both councils supported the CIB, but Mayor John Hamilton instead wanted a 501c3 nonprofit to manage the project. He says a CIB will put much of the project's cost on the city.
Even with all the public outcry and public support that we've had for the Capital Improvement Board, that the mayor still is not listening to the community, it feels like, in supporting this particular method for moving forward.
Last December, Hamilton vetoed a city council resolution supporting the CIB. The council overrode his veto in January. Public discussion was scarce this year until mid-June, when the city and county resumed talks about the project. It was then leaders discussed a draft interlocal cooperation agreement. Cockrell says that document lays out the project's next steps. The commissioners say the deadline to have the draft ratified is December 1st. Both the mayor's office and the commissioners will have to sign the document before it can go into effect. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lucas Gonzalez.
Cockrell says the mayor's office so far hasn't supported the draft agreement. We reached out to Hamilton's office for comment on the story, but they did not respond. An Evansville high school sophomore and violinist has traveled to New York City to learn and perform in the exclusive National Youth Orchestra 2 at Carnegie Hall. As WNIN's Tim Jagalo tells us, he's the only Indiana resident in the orchestra this year.
Violinist Braden Riley, age 15, of Evansville, is working with instructor Michael Chu, who is also the principal second violinist for the Evansville Philharmonic Orchestra. They are working on etudes, which are short musical exercise pieces, and on building Braden's repertoire.
He is a very serious musician who just came to me looking for specific guidance in terms of maybe doing this as a career. So we're making sure that we're really setting up both his right arm, his left arm for success, and then through that selecting repertoire that is appropriate but challenging for him at the same time.
Braden is a Wrights High School sophomore and one of the principal violinists for the Evansville Vanderburgh School Corporation Honors Orchestra. This is the orchestra performing in early March. He just got back from attending Sounding Point Academy in California, which is a 2-week professional development academy for violinists. But maybe most importantly, he was also accepted into the National Youth Orchestra at Carnegie Hall in New York City.
So it's a summer program comprised of young musicians all across the country. Has a rigorous audition process, and we work with some of the best educators in the country.
It'll be a whirlwind trip starting July 1st. They'll rehearse in New York at Purchase College, perform at Carnegie Hall July 15th, then perform in the Dominican Republic, finally getting back to New York July 20th. Participants have gone on to do great things in music, such as 2 members of the New York Philharmonic, 2 members of the Cleveland Orchestra, 4 in the Houston Symphony, and some playing abroad. Braden's final pre-New York performance was a recital at the Trinity Methodist Church in downtown Evansville, with friends and family watching him perform pieces by Sebastian Bach and Camille Saint-Saëns. Chu says Braden takes this instrument far more seriously than maybe the average 15-year-old.
In terms of his style, Braden is an exceptionally passionate player, and he really just pours his heart out into that piece.
Probably one of the least aggressive people that I know. So he does things when he plays that it is contradictory to, I think, his personality sometimes.
I think the violin is just a way to express myself that I can't really do with anything else in my life.
Braden is one of about 70 to be accepted, out of about 650 applications. He's also the only participant from Indiana.
Well, it's really special, and it's kind of hard to wrap my head around being the only one from Indiana for NYO and NYO2.
His mother Mindy says there may have been a few tears when he was accepted into the program, and it's a validation of all his hard work.
I'm just excited for him to be with a group of young, talented musicians, just being immersed in a group that will be hopefully very like-minded and really push, and I just think it will be a great experience for him.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Tim Jagalow.
And work is progressing on schedule for a new field house in the former Fair Oaks Mall in Columbus. It's part of what's described as a community sport, recreation, and wellness space in the heart of the city. Officials say the Christmas tree at the Frame Apex marks the next step of construction.
I'm told that that's just a habit that you do when you do what's called topping out. And so a week or two ago, there were several of us who went up to Nexus Park and signed a beam. So my signature is up there somewhere.
It'll be called Circle K Fieldhouse once complete, big enough for a soccer field. Linup says City Council is allocating funding as construction moves forward.
We would like to have put all this in one funding request right at the beginning, but given the pandemic and given some of the uncertainties with respect to cost, it just really didn't make sense.
Construction is to be completed by April. Linup says the sports and health complex could see up to 10,000 visitors over a typical weekend. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.